All right, we are recording for Chapter 9 of Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. So it starts... The chapter actually covers a fair amount. At least as far as, like, we're here, then here, then here, then here, then here. It starts with Spock and Chekhov walking into the kitchen. So we have them discussing the whole thing about the uniforms, and it's like, why can't they just vaporize the boots? And Valero, pulls the face out, shoots at a part of the kitchenware there, and sets off the alarms, all that. We also get this line, because a lot of this I didn't feel like highlighting, but this I found a little interesting. All Starfleet issue clothing is fireproof, Spock reminds Chekhov, and it's just like, really? I feel like there are burns that we have seen on Starfleet clothing prior to this, and certainly after. Also, they would have to be some sort of miracle material as well, because I actually saw something not that long ago talking about uniforms, U.S. military uniforms, and we do try to get them to be as fire-resistant as possible, mainly self-extinguishing, so that just means that if it's self-extinguishing, if fire is applied to it, once the source of the fire is gone, it goes out, that it does not itself burn. But a problem is with trying to get it to be completely fireproof, you would also see it being like a hard shell. No, not it can still be flexible, but there would be no breathing, and that would be very uncomfortable for whoever's wearing it, and potentially even dangerous. Because you do need, your skin does breathe as well, so you do need the clothing to support breathing of that. So, yeah, so it would have to be miracle material, and as is mainly highlighted for the whole, I think we've seen these uniforms burn. But I will grant, I am thinking, when? Oh wait, yeah, that's true, even just in Final Frontier. Because when Kirk was hit by the being in that, he is burned. At least in the movie, you do see a burn there. And I do believe that, yeah, we do see in yesterday's Enterprise, which has an older ship, so they're in a different style of uniform, closer to what you see in these movies. I'm pretty sure you do see burns on those as well. So it's like, yeah, that there are times that we do see after this being burned. So it's probably just, something thrown in there where it's like, shouldn't put that in there, dude. I mean, it's small, but it's a technical detail. I'm going to call it technical errors. Anyway. So yeah, I have all that. Uhura comes up, Scotty comes up, all that after the alarm. But we do have the whole, Uhura has her comment about, I've pulled out my wooden shoe when Starfleet is screaming for us to return to port. Scott appears. Mr. Scott, Spock said, any progress on repairing our warp drive? There's nothing wrong with the bloody thing. And it's like, if we return to space dock, the assassins will surely manage to dispose of them. It's like, could take weeks, that whole scene. We also get this, because Valeris is just like looking at him like a lie, and Spock says, an error. He experienced no internal dissonance at the thought of prevaricating, so long as the benefit achieved in so doing outweighed any harm. In this case, the benefit was Kirk and McCoy's lives. So, this is interesting, and it's also... Yes, there's also that. There's like two parts to this highlight here. The next one does mention that it is a galactic myth that Vulcans do not lie, but it's still interesting the whole Spock... What he's basically describing there is he does see the ends justifying the means. He's not going to a inappropriate end like the conspirators are, which is committing murder so they can achieve a war that, well, at minimum deals with whichever enemy it is. I mean, if the clans defeat the Federation, the clans are happy. If the Federation defeats the clans, the Federation is happy. It's not really great, but anyhow. I do still find it interesting that is essentially what he's saying here. Well, thinking. But Uhura has a good line here. I'll tell them someone threw a gravity boot into it, the warp core. And it's just like, that's appropriate. Both for the joke, because that's what they're looking for, is gravity boot, but also just going back to what Valeris told them, that it was throwing wooden shoes into machinery. The wooden shoes were called sabot, hence the word sabotage. And it's just like, kind of actually describing that exact thing there, Uhura. Kind of neat. But she just said, Uhura said unhappily. It's like, it's actually kind of funny. Spock noted Valeris' hesitation. If she ascribed to the galactic myth, as many did, that Vulcans did not lie, she might very well be tempted to notify Starfleet Command on her own initiative. Spock watched her and waited. Right, Valeris said at last. A strange look had come into her eyes, one that Spock interpreted as repressed amusement and mild exasperation. A gravity boot in the warp drive. So it's like, yeah, she's not going to do that. She's not going to report it in, but it is... Later on, there's a comment, a thought from her that made me think that it doesn't have to be, but it did kind of feel like this could be a false narrative kind of thing that I don't want it to be. But anyhow. Another technical thing here, we go to Kirk on Ropenti, and this is where the big guy with the glowing face, in fact, the way it's even described here is... resembled nothing so much as a brightly painted horned toad. The fight there. That the guy basically came over and started stuff with Jim. Within a light second, Kirk and the alien was squared off. And it's like, that's... A light second would be a unit of distance, not of time. And it's just... it's one of those things. Star Wars getting it wrong is they're kind of stupid. It was also the first movie. Like the Kessel Run in less than whatever it is parsecs. It's like parsecs is a measure of distance, not of time. Now, true, people did try to come up with an explanation for that, it wasn't misspeaking, it was that plotted a course that had the least amount of unnecessary travel. So that's the way of saying that. It's like, that kind of makes sense, but still not all that impressive, because that should be something anyone can calculate and then figure out. I mean, it's more so they just got it wrong, because parsec sounds like it's a unit for time. Light second sounds like a unit for time, but neither are. They're both units of distance. This is the 6 movie novelizations. You've got the 5 movies before, the animated series and the television series. And Star Trek is supposed to be science fiction, not science fantasy like Star Wars. You're supposed to get this stuff right. Science fiction is supposed to be technical. And technically accurate within itself. So, yeah. We do get the scene with Sulu on the Excelsior where someone comes to the door, wakes him up. This scene is a little different because it's actually Janice Rand who comes, rather than just random crewmen. But we do get an explanation for why somebody comes to disturb him instead of using the communicators. And also why it's specifically Janice Rand. And this is because he trusts her, and Sulu is basically trying to play it very close to the chest. He wants as few people to know what he is doing, and he's also not telling anyone, because when there is an inquest, he wants the crew as much as possible to be able to say, we wouldn't party to this, we were just on the ship. And that all the responsibility can put on him. It's not going to be well, the first officer knew and chose not to intervene, therefore the first officer is also up in charges. No, it would be first officer did not know, and so, yeah. And this includes, he gave the order that any communications from the Enterprise, or from Starfleet would be given to him in person. So that way there's no record of a voice communication over the ship's internal systems. He had asked Rand to relay any communications from Enterprise or Starfleet Command directly to him in person. Connections via intercom aboard ship would directly become part of ship's record, and Sulu preferred for now to keep certain things off the record. Then we have this. As the door snapped shut behind her, Sulu sighed and sat back, now fully awake. Janice was a good officer. If Sulu yielded to the temptation to explain what he was doing, she would be as liable as he. He had no desire to implicate any of his crew. Which, on the one hand, I'm good with that. On the other hand, though, it was in Star Trek The Voyage Home novelization, granted, novelization, not movie, with Sulu that yells at Kirk for the whole, dude, we chose to do this. Stop trying to take it all on you. It's actually insulting to us, as though we didn't make the choice. He is also robbing his crew of that. But, to be fair, Kirk actually asked his crew for help, and they all said yes. He's actually basically forcing them to go along. Bit different, but it still is, he is not allowing them the choice, and that, you could argue, is also unethical. Necessary, but unethical. Now we cut back to Repente, and this I do like. I do like this. This is not just me shaming it for technical things or because I find it a little interesting. No, this I do like. So this is Kirk and McCoy are in their bunk, trying to sleep, and even had Kirk is like, oh man, I wish I had the Vulcan discipline of Spock, who can just like shut everything out and just go to sleep. Well, at least shut everything out because his mind is just racing. It also mentions one other thing before I get to the highlight, that as he and Bones are talking, they're on the lower bunk. The top bunk, hands and claws are just like randomly falling down. It's like Kirk notices this first without Bones noticing, and he just keeps going, but he's like, what is going on? It appears that Martia, before coming to talk to them, is actually knocking out everyone that might hear. So is like up there and somehow knocking out the people on the top bunk, so when she talks to Kirk, no one will hear. No one will know. But anyway, with him and Bones talking, we have the whole some people are afraid of the future. Yeah. Where is it? Are you afraid of the future? That was the general idea I intended to convey. Didn't mean this future. But the whole, some people are afraid of the future, of what might happen. Now, in the movie, it kind of cuts out a lot of this, but what it leads to is this, what I've highlighted. I was frightened of myself, what I had become after David's death, after what happened to Carol. I was frightened of no more neutral zone. I was used, I'm still screwing that, I was used to hating Klingons. That's why I failed in our assignment. You didn't fail, McCoy protested. It wasn't your fault Gorkin died. If he hadn't, I would have failed. I couldn't play diplomat with them, Bones. You saw that. It never even occurred to me to take Gorkin at his word. Spock was right. I was behaving like a bigot, blaming all Klingons for the act of one. So I do like this. I really do. Because it kind of goes back to what I was saying so many chapters ago about how Kirk's normal behavior is not the hatred, is not the anger. But he had a special motivation, as I put it then, with being reminded of David's death, but also Carol's injury. So he has a special motivation for the hatred towards them. At the moment, would he still have had a just general lingering hatred? Yeah, sure, whatever. I can't argue on that one. But the more specific and impassioned hatred that he was showing, that's out of character for him. But he had special motivation for it. And then here is him basically recognizing that that was the case for him. And probably also some, if there is a lingering stuff there, some of that. And because of it, yeah, he failed in his mission. Didn't matter if Gorkin, if there was no assassination plot, none at all. He still failed because he was not performing as he was supposed to. His behavior was wrong. And it's basically because he's afraid. He was afraid of the future, of not being allowed to hate the Klingons anymore. That he had to treat them better. That he had to treat them as equals. And all. Well, not necessarily as. I said equals. I was tempted to say as humans, but I mean, that's stupid. And kind of speaks to Ezra's point. But just as equals in that, passing them on the street kind of thing, that, oh, hey, how you doing? Kind of thing, as opposed to seeing them on the street and immediately crossing away to not have to interact with them. Or something like that. It's that's what I mean there. That he was afraid of having to no reason to hate anymore. Which, the funny thing is, that is very real. That may seem silly, but there are definitely people that they become so used to hating that it isn't a behavior, it isn't a choice, it's a habit. And like many habits, especially negative ones, they're hard to get rid of. That you will find ways around it as well, so that you can justify the habit. And he's essentially hit that. It would be, not that I have any experience with addiction, but it would almost be like he has hit rock bottom and is having to figure it out. That he's realized fully the damage that his hatred had produced, and he's now having to recover from that. So I know I'm probably very much misusing it, but I do see it kind of like that. And hatred can, in some ways, probably be like an addiction. That it can provide a kind of mental, emotional release. That because if you hate someone, that it can give you a satisfaction that you're better than them. If it excuses bad behavior, so you're able to indulge in bad behavior, it can make you feel better from that. It can give you that dopamine release. So I could see hatred in some ways actually being an addiction. Not the same thing as a chemical addiction, like to various drugs, but it still is. I could see that, and he's having to face that, and that he screwed up, he failed, and I as I said already, I like that it is seeing character development there. The only, and it's not really an issue, but the only thing I would point out is that his character technically should have already been like this. It was that special motivation, which also, if there is that lingering hate, this would still, this would counter the special motivation, but it would also potentially counter some of the lingering hate. There might still be some there, but it's still that this is good character development. It's interesting how it's written and well written. It's just technically we also have to put in the hate. Because I'm not sure if it's fair to, oh wait, no. Dave the Dove, there's hatred there. Aaron of Mercy, hatred there. No, so that is true. No, he's actually always had a certain lingering hate. Well, not lingering hate, but base level hate just always there for the Klingons. It would be crap. The one where he's on the planet and the muskets, that whole thing. Don't remember what that one is called, but that would be not necessarily a hatred of Klingons. Also their specific actions, but so I guess that is true. There actually is historically for the character a hatred of Klingons. That is on a true racial level. I should actually make a note of that. As I think about it, there is evidence throughout the original series of him having a basic slash not foundational lingering hatred of Klingons. This moment of character development is likely most about his special motivation to hate, but it would also apply to this lingering hatred. Okay, what is this next one? Oh, yeah. So after Martia talks to him and leaves, there's the whole, what is it with you? But there's actually something before that in the novelization that isn't in the movie. Beside him, McCoy made a low noise of disgust and propped himself up on one elbow after she has left. Kirk raised his eyebrows in mock innocence. I think I've been alienated. This is after she kisses him, and it's like, I get the joke. It's still not that funny a joke. Early 90s, though, it was appropriate. Well, it was accepted back then. But then we get the McCoy rolled his eyes. What is it with you anyway? Jim shrugged. Still think we're finished? The doctor sighed, more than ever. And that even in the movie, that scene, without the I think I've been alienated joke, still is a funny line where Bones is just like, why does this always happen with you? Seriously, what is going on here? It's like, think we haven't got a chance? Yeah, why would that change? Then there's this. Is this the? No, it's not. Okay. Sorry. Chekhov and Spock are talking. Oh yeah, because they talk about having to check the. Okay. Yes, Chekhov has found the blood sample. That is Klingon blood. Spock looked at it, and it's like, okay, we have to check all the uniforms now, because if this was tracked back here, then we do know it almost certainly would have gotten on their uniforms as well. So we can find that. And all that. And it's like, how's this really help us and all that? And Spock explains that they have to find it so that they can rescue Kirk and Bones, but also explains, if we attempt a rescue without clear proof of their innocence, all Starfleet is bound by interstellar law to recapture them and extradite them to Klingon space. So basically saying that if all we do is we rescue them, a jailbreak, then we're in the wrong on the Federation side. But if we can somehow show they are not the assassins, then what we did is we freed them to compel not necessarily compel an investigation, but at least the Federation would not extradite then. And it would then fall to the diplomats to work out what all was going on. And that is an interesting argument for why, interesting point for why they're not rushing in there to get Kirk and Bones immediately. Why it is they have to hang back and wait. But there is also, here we have Valeris. This is the final highlight. She did not believe that discovering the missing boots or uniforms would clear Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy. Spock's efforts would prove futile, but Valeris did not feel it her place to tell him so. Which, that is bordering on, is this a false narrator? Because this is, again, her thoughts. And it's like, she might be thinking that, what use is that evidence to him? Might be thinking that, I'm not sure. Because she would know more. And ultimately, she's the one that they would need, because she's not the trigger. She was not the one who pulled the trigger, but she's the one who modified the databanks and also provided information to Chang, so there was more involved there. Technically, also, they should be able to figure out about any transmissions that carry the data outside the ship, technically, at least the databank information that was brought up in the personal log would be enough for the Spock should be like, wait a minute, how do they have that information? Anyway. So I don't know. It's just ambiguous enough to not necessarily be false narrator, but I will also, to her point, how does finding it clear them? Because it doesn't, all that means is Kirk and McCoy could not have been the ones who pulled the trigger, but that was already proven because they were on the bridge. Like there was no contention on that. It would be more so if they could prove Chang's method of reasoning was that, hey, it was members of your crew, you're responsible for your crew, therefore you're responsible for the crime, which is faulty in this. Certainly for what their actual punishment was, and Bones has nothing to do with it at all. So that there's already that issue. Being able to prove it was, I guess if you could prove it was a conspiracy, such that somebody else directed it, then you might be able to say that, Kirk was responsible because, if somebody else ordered them to do this, they're not acting for me, they're not a member of my crew. But it's, I don't know. I mean, technically, it should end up being that they are rescuing them despite not having clear evidence that they were not involved, but yeah. I'm not a mystery writer. And technically this is a mystery. It is a detective novel, a detective story kind of thing. And that's not my thing. So I can't criticize it too much aside from just, yeah, some of the logic here, we're not quite getting A, B, C, D. It's more like A, B, D. What is C? It's like, don't worry about that. Just go from D to E to F now. But I mean, I'm still largely enjoying it. These are technical issues, but it's how high a standard should I be holding it to here? I'm because it's still being written well. It still is interesting. These technical issues like that, like what I just mentioned about how does this actually show that they're innocent, and so the Federation can't argue, no, we're not going to extradite them because of this. That's weak, but it also is it's serving the purpose it needs to, and it's kind of to the side. It is, they're MacGuffins, right? So they're kind of minor. They're just providing a reason for certain actions to occur, certain events to occur, but they are MacGuffins. So it is kind of the whole, yeah, we can just swat those away. We don't need to worry about them too much. Whereas the larger point about the conspiracy, that's more interesting. That's what's more so the focus. But technically, we haven't had anything about the conspiracy for a while, aside from just the Spock trying to figure it out, Kirk trying to figure it out, Martia warning them that basically you won't, when it happens, you won't know where it's coming from. So there's that. But it's like, which does kind of also speak to, yeah, she's potentially the one. So, but it's, yeah. As far as just a straight detective aspect of it, not the strongest. But as I said, it's the conspiracy that matters. Hopefully with chapter 10, yeah, chapter 10 might, because in theory that will have them escaping from within Rurapente. We'll also have the whole crewman Dax thing, but escaping from Rurapente and being rescued, which could then have the warden with the whole, his name is, and then they beam up. We may get that there. That I could believe, but, yeah. Alright. We'll just wait and see how that goes, all that. So, anyway. See you next time.